London, England, June 3rd, 1978. The Lyceum Theatre was packed with 15,000 people, all waiting for Bob Marley and the Wailers to take the stage. This wasn't just another concert. This was being recorded for a live album. The energy in the room was electric, anticipation hanging thick in the air. But in the back row, in the cheapest seats he could afford, sat a 72-year-old man named Joseph Thompson. He was alone. He'd spent his last bit of money on this ticket, and he wasn't entirely sure why. Joseph hadn't been to a concert in years. He couldn't really afford luxuries like this anymore. But when he'd seen the poster advertising Bob Marley at the Lyceum, something inside him had stirred. A memory, a feeling, something he couldn't quite name. So he'd bought the ticket. Joseph didn't know much about Bob Marley. He'd heard the name, seen it in newspapers, but reggae music wasn't something that played in his small flat in East London. He was too old for modern music, too tired to keep up with what young people were listening to these days. But still, he'd come. And now he sat in the back row, surrounded by young people with dreadlocks and colorful clothing, feeling completely out of place. The lights went down, the crowd erupted, and Bob Marley walked onto that stage. The moment Bob appeared, the entire Lyceum transformed. It wasn't just a concert venue anymore. It was something sacred. Bob radiated an energy that filled every corner of the room, reaching even the back row where Joseph sat. Bob opened with Trench Town Rock, and the crowd went wild. People were dancing, singing, swaying in perfect unison. Joseph sat still, watching, trying to understand what all the excitement was about. But as Bob sang, as that voice filled the theater, something began to stir in Joseph's memory. Something distant, something he'd forgotten. Bob moved through his set list with effortless power. Them belly full. Rebel music. Lively up yourself. Each song more powerful than the last. And then Bob spoke into the microphone. This next song, Bob said, his voice carrying clearly through the theater, is a song about where I come from, about the place that made me, about Trenchtown. The opening chords of No Woman, No Cry began. Joseph froze. That melody. He knew that melody, not this version, not with these words, but the melody underneath it, that pattern of notes. Suddenly, Joseph was back in Kingston, Jamaica, back in 1948, back in a small wooden schoolhouse in Trenchtown, where he used to teach music to children who had nothing. Children from the poorest neighborhoods, children who came to his free music classes because it was the only beauty they had access to in their hard lives. No woman, no cry. No woman, no cry. Joseph's hands began to shake. That melody. He'd taught that melody, years ago, decades ago, to dozens of children whose names he'd long forgotten, but one child in particular. A quiet boy, small for his age, mixed race, which made him an outsider even among the poor. The other children sometimes picked on him, but when that boy picked up a guitar, everyone went silent. What was his name? Joseph struggled to remember. Robert something, with the sad eyes and the beautiful voice. No, it couldn't be. Bob was singing, his voice full of emotion, telling a story about the government yard in Trenchtown, about good friends and hard times, and the promise that everything would be all right. Joseph stared at the stage, at the man with the dreadlocks and the powerful presence, and tried to see the little boy he'd known 30 years ago. It couldn't be the same person. That little boy had nothing. No money, no opportunities, no future that Joseph could see. Joseph had given him an old guitar, shown him some chords, encouraged him to keep playing. But then Joseph had left Jamaica in 1950, moved to London, and never looked back. He'd never known what happened to any of those children. On stage, Bob finished No Woman, No Cry to thunderous applause. He smiled, wiped his brow, and took a drink of water. Then he did something he rarely did mid-concert. He started walking to the edge of the stage, looking out into the crowd. His eyes were scanning, searching for something. You know, Bob said into the microphone. I grew up in Trenchtown. Some of you know that. It was hard. Really hard. We didn't have much. But there was this man, this teacher, who used to give free music lessons in a little schoolhouse. He didn't have to do that. He didn't get paid for it. But he showed up every week and taught kids like me that music was more than just sound. Music was hope. Music was power. Music was a way out. Joseph's heart started pounding. His name was Mr. Thompson, Bob continued. Joseph Thompson. He gave me my first guitar, taught me my first chords, and when I played something wrong, he never got mad. He just smiled and said, "Try again, little man. The music is in you. You just got to let it out." The crowd was silent now, listening to Bob's story. I never got to thank him, Bob said, his voice thick with emotion. When I was about 10 years old, Mr. Thompson left Jamaica. I never saw him again, and I always wondered what happened to him. If he knew what his kindness meant. If he knew that the guitar he gave a poor kid from Trenchtown changed that kid's whole life. Joseph was crying now, tears streaming down his weathered face. The young people around him were looking at him strangely, this old man weeping in the back row. Bob shaded his eyes against the stage lights, still scanning the crowd. I don't even know if Mr. Thompson is still alive. He'd be old now. Really old. But if you're out there somewhere, Mr. Thompson, if you can hear me, I want you to know. I'm here, Joseph said. But his voice was too quiet. Nobody could hear him over the ambient noise of 15,000 people. I'm here, Joseph said louder, standing up. Dumha, people around him turned to look. Someone pointed, then another person. A wave of attention moving through the crowd. Bob saw the movement. Saw an old man standing in the back row, waving his arms. Sir, Bob said into the microphone. In the back, stand up again. Joseph stood, his legs shaking. Bob stared. Even from that distance, even after 30 years, something in the old man's face was familiar. What's your name? Bob called out. Joseph, the old man shouted back. Joseph Thompson! The crowd gasped, then erupted. 15,000 people realized what was happening. The teacher Bob had just been talking about was here, in this theater, right now. Bob's face transformed. His mouth fell open, his eyes filled with tears. Mr. Thompson? Bob said, his voice barely a whisper but carried clearly through the microphone. Is that really you? It's me, Robert, Joseph called back, using the name he'd known Bob by. It's me. Bob put his hand over his mouth, overcome with emotion. He turned to his security team. Bring him to the stage, please, bring him to me. Security guards immediately moved toward the back row. The crowd parted, creating a path. Joseph, still crying, still shaking, made his way through 15,000 people who were all watching, all crying themselves, all understanding that they were witnessing something extraordinary. It took several minutes for Joseph to reach the stage. His legs were old. His body was tired. But people helped him, supported him, guided him forward. When Joseph finally reached the front, Bob jumped off the stage. He didn't wait for security to help Joseph up. He came down to where Joseph was. For a moment, they just looked at each other. The superstar and the retired teacher. The man who had become a legend and the man who had given him his first guitar. Then Bob wrapped his arms around Joseph Thompson and held him tight. Mr. Thompson, Bob said, crying, I can't believe it's you. I can't believe you're here. I didn't know, Joseph said through his tears. I didn't know you were that little Robert. I saw the name Bob Marley and I didn't connect it. You were just Robert, little Robert from the corner. I was, Bob said, pulling back to look at Joseph's face. I was that kid. And you saved my life, Mr. Thompson. You gave me a reason to believe I could be something more than just another poor kid with no future. You always had talent, Joseph said, his voice shaking. Even then, I could hear it. You had something special. Bob helped Joseph onto the stage, supporting him carefully. 15,000 people were on their feet, applauding, crying, overwhelmed by the beauty of this moment. Bob brought Joseph to center stage and handed him a chair. Joseph sat, exhausted but beaming. "This is Mr. Joseph Thompson," Bob said to the crowd. "This is the man who taught me everything. Without him, there is no Bob Marley. Without him, none of this exists. Not the music, not the message, nothing." The applause was deafening. Bob knelt beside Joseph's chair. "Do you remember the first song you taught me?" Joseph thought for a moment. "There were so many children, so many songs. It was a gospel song," Bob said gently. "You taught it to the whole class. This little light of mine. Remember?" Joseph's eyes lit up. Yes, I remember. We sang it every week." "Will you sing it with me now?" Bob asked. "One more time?" Joseph nodded, too emotional to speak. Bob turned to his band. "Follow me." Simple and slow. Bob picked up an acoustic guitar. He sat on the stage floor next to Joseph's chair, just like he used to sit in that schoolhouse 30 years ago. And then Bob started singing. "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine." His voice was soft, intimate, not the powerful performance voice, but something gentler. Something that took everyone in that theater back to a simpler time, a purer time. Joseph joined in, his voice thin and wavering with age, but still carrying the melody. "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine." 15,000 people watched in complete silence. This wasn't a concert anymore. This was a sacred moment. A circle completing itself. A student honoring his teacher. A man acknowledging the person who had set him on his path. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. When the song ended, Bob set down the guitar and took Joseph's hands in his. "Thank you," Bob said. "Thank you for seeing something in me when no one else did. Thank you for giving me that guitar. Thank you for telling me I could be more." Joseph was crying so hard he could barely speak. "I didn't do anything special, Robert. I just showed you some chords." "You did everything," Bob said firmly. "You gave a poor kid hope. You gave him a dream. You gave him music. And that music went out into the world and touched millions of people. Every person who's ever been helped by one of my songs, they're helped by you too, Mr. Thompson. Because none of it would exist without you." The crowd erupted again. People were openly sobbing. Even the hardened security guards had tears in their eyes. Bob turned to the audience. "I want everyone here to understand something. We all have the power to change lives. We don't have to be famous or rich or powerful. Mr. Thompson was just a teacher. He didn't have much. But what he gave me was priceless. And if he could do that for me, imagine what you can do for someone else." Bob stood and helped Joseph to his feet. "Mr. Thompson is going to stay up here for the rest of the show. He's going to watch from the side of the stage, because he deserves to see what he helped create." Security set up a comfortable chair for Joseph at the side of the stage. And for the next hour, Joseph Thompson watched as the student he'd taught 30 years ago performed for 15,000 people with a power and grace that took his breath away. After the concert, backstage, Bob spent 2 hours with Joseph. He didn't rush to the after-party. He didn't prioritize anyone else. He sat with his old teacher and talked. Joseph told him about leaving Jamaica, about struggling in London, about working as a school custodian for 20 years because he couldn't find teaching work, about retiring with barely enough money to survive, about living in a tiny flat and wondering if his life had mattered at all. "Your life mattered," Bob said intensely. "Your life mattered more than you'll ever know. You changed my life, Mr. Thompson, and through me, you've changed millions of lives." Before Joseph left that night, Bob did something that Joseph would never forget. Bob pulled out a checkbook and wrote a check. He handed it to Joseph. "This is for the guitar," Bob said. Joseph looked at the check. It was for £10,000, more money than Joseph had ever seen in his life. "Robert, I can't accept this. That guitar cost maybe £5. This isn't for the guitar, Bob said gently. This is for everything else. This is so you don't have to worry anymore. This is so you can live comfortably. This is so you know that what you gave me, I'm giving back. Take it, Mr. Thompson. Please, let me do this for you. Joseph took the check with trembling hands. I don't know what to say. Say you'll come to another show, Bob said, smiling. Say you'll let me know if you need anything. Say you'll remember that you're the reason I'm standing here. I'll never forget tonight, Joseph said. Never. Bob hugged him one more time. Neither will I, Mr. Thompson. Neither will I. Joseph Thompson lived for another 7 years. Bob made sure he never wanted for anything. He moved Joseph to a better flat, paid for his medical care, sent him money every month, and Joseph attended every Bob Marley concert in London. Every single one. Bob always had a special seat reserved for him on the side of the stage. And every show, Bob would point to Joseph and tell the crowd, "That's my teacher. That's the man who made all this possible." When Bob Marley died in 1981, Joseph was at his bedside. He held Bob's hand and sang "This Little Light of Mine" one last time, his voice cracking with grief. "You let your light shine, Robert," Joseph whispered. "You let it shine brighter than I ever imagined possible." Joseph died in 1985, at the age of 79. At his funeral, they played Bob Marley's music, and they told the story of the teacher and the student, the guitar and the dream, the moment when a small act of kindness changed the world. Today, at the Bob Marley Museum in Kingston, there's a special exhibit. It's a recreation of that small schoolhouse in Trenchtown where Joseph Thompson taught his free music classes. On the wall hangs a photograph from that night at the Lyceum Theatre, Bob Marley kneeling beside Joseph Thompson, both holding a guitar, both singing, both crying. Underneath is a plaque with Bob's words, "Without him, there is no Bob Marley. Without him, none of this exists." And next to the photograph is an old guitar. The guitar Joseph gave to a poor kid from Trenchtown in 1948. The guitar that started everything. Because sometimes, one act of kindness is all it takes. One guitar. One teacher who believes in a student everyone else ignores. One person who sees potential where others see only poverty. Joseph Thompson never became famous. He never had his name in lights. He died without much money or recognition. But he gave the world Bob Marley. And through Bob, he gave the world hope, joy, revolution, and love. That little light Joseph Thompson shared didn't just shine. It illuminated the whole world. And it's still shining today.